All right. Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهله وصحبه أجمعين. My name is Ismahana Abdullahi. I'm the Executive Director for the Muslim American Society, Public Affairs and Civic Engagement. And I have here with us an esteemed guest, Brother Rashad, coming from LA, calling in and tuning in from LA. And today is Census Day. Today is an exciting day for all of us to make sure that our communities are counted. And this webinar is really meant for us to kind of dive a little bit deep into understanding what exactly the census is. Why is it important to make sure that our communities are visible, and to make sure that we demand that we count by filling out the census and making sure that our voices are heard? How is it going to impact our communities, especially during these times that we're living in right now, where things are shifting and we're kind of reconfiguring and figuring out what the new normal is going to be like past post COVID-19, inshallah. So without any further ado, Brother Rashad, I want to welcome you to kind of get us started and just dive deep. Let us know what the census is and what's at stake.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me, Sister Asmahan. I really appreciate it. And happy Census Day. Happy Census Day. Today is Census Day. Obviously, this day is a benchmark day. So a lot of people have already filled out their census forms. But today is considered Census Day. So we want to encourage participation, especially on this day. These are changing times. So our plans have shifted, just like everyone else's plans have shifted. So first, I just wanted to talk about why it's important. We want to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. The census is in the U.S. Constitution. So Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution requires us to do a census once every 10 years. And it's been happening since 1790. So since 1790, every 10 years we've been doing a census, complete count of everybody. And when I say everybody, it means everybody, whether you're a citizen, you're a green card holder, anyone that lives in the United States counts. And there are two reasons. So two things that I'd like to talk about. One is reapportionment. So in the House of Representatives, the members of the House that represent us, every state will get the number based on census results. So for example, just to compare, after the 2010 census, some states gained seats, some states lost seats. So for example, California kept its seats, New York lost 2 seats, and Texas gained 4 seats. So representation matters, and it's based on the census results. So that's why it's important for everyone to count. The second thing that I want to mention is federal funds. So $675 billion every year for the next 10 years will be distributed to states, and from states to counties and local governments, and it's all based on the census numbers. Each state will get its share based on how many people filled out their census forms. And of course, these are government programs for schools, for Medi-Cal, Medicare, school, like all these different government programs will get its funding based on the census results. So it's so important that we all fill out those forms. I mean, I have and of course, we gotta count everyone, even our little children. For some reason, children are undercounted. People think that they don't have to count their babies. These are very important. I mean, I just had a baby 5 months old. I'm going to count her. She's my little census baby, and she will be counted because we need to know in 6 years how many children are going to be in first grade. So a lot of things are determined by the census results. I want to talk a little bit about the timeline. Today is Census Day. In the last few weeks, you probably received an invitation. Everyone actually received an invitation to respond online. Around the the third week of March. And then you probably received a reminder letter. You all received it. It just depends if you check your mails. And then you also probably received a third reminder postcard. Next will be the actual paper questionnaire for those who did not respond online or by phone. So it's so important to respond today, and we'll go over the actual online form. It's so important to respond today so we can get it over with. We don't want to send it to make calls and try to call everyone. Please respond so we can get it over with. Instead of obviously our plans have shifted a little bit. The plan was to start sending census enumerators to households later in April and in May, but as things change, we're adjusting our plans as well. The plan was to completely count everyone by July 31st, and that includes the non-response follow-up and people who didn't respond either by phone, online, or by mail. We were going to go and follow up with them once and twice. And the plan was to end it by July 31st. It has been extended until August 14th, and plans will be adjusted as things develop. I want to talk before I talk about the actual confidentiality and how important how seriously we take confidentiality of everyone's answers. I want to go through the actual form, since we talked about submitting it online today. So it's so short, quick. So I'm gonna share my screen and show everyone how easy and simple it is. So here we go. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So you go to my2020census.gov, my2020census.gov, and you start your questionnaire right here. You received a 12-digit census ID in your mailbox. So you put that ID here. If you don't have it, you click here and in order to collect it. So you submit where you live in on April 1st. You go next. Oops. We do this. So you put your address, and then you hit next. Submit. You go. First name, last name, and then household questions. So very simple question. You put how many people live in this household, and then you go next. You put the names. So there's my name, there's my wife, and then you go, there you go. So, and you make sure that everybody that lives in the household is counted. And then after this, there's a question about whether you own or rent the home, and then a question about each person's ethnicity and each person's basically the race or ethnicity question. It's very simple. It won't take you 10 minutes. So I just wanted to quickly share that with everyone. It's very simple and easy, so and secure. So back to um, uh, back to the present to my talk about the confidentiality. I wanted to emphasize it's very confidential. Title 13 of the U.S. Code. Title 13 of the U.S. Code protects your census information. The census is required by law. Results are shared only in statistical format. So the statistical format only will be shared, but your personal response, every respondent's personal information is protected, and it cannot be shared with any other government agency. Whatever you respond in the census stays in the census. So your response is not going to be shared, not with the FBI, not with the ICE, not even with the White House. So what we have in the census stays there and it's protected by Title 13 of the US Code. All of our employees, including myself, swear to a lifetime oath to protect your information, and it's a lifetime oath. It's not only until I'm done with the census, it's a lifetime oath. And penalties for wrongful disclosure is up to 5 years imprisonment and or a fine of $250,000. And just for the record, since the implementation of Title 13, there has not been any incident, not one single incident of wrongful disclosure. So we take it very seriously, and the respondent's information is protected and safe. Now, we want to make sure that everyone has access. This time around, the census made it available for people to respond in different languages. So the paper form is going to be available in Spanish and in English. People can respond in either language, but online, there are 12 non-English languages that you can respond with, online or by phone. So 13 total languages people can respond in when they fill out their census form, either on the internet or by phone. And those languages are Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Russian, Arabic, Tagalog, Polish, French, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Japanese. So we want to make sure that a lot of people have access to the census information, to the census form. So there's people can respond in any of these languages. And there's items available in 59 non-English languages to help filling out those forms. So it's so important to complete your form as soon as possible. I did it. Many folks have done it also. And just to give you an update, until today, so people had chance to respond since March 12th, and until today, 38.4% of the U.S. population, that's the latest numbers, have already filled out their forms. So we want to encourage people to fill them out today online or by phone. And the website is updated on a daily basis for people to look into it. There's a lot to talk about, but I welcome questions and I welcome participation from everyone who's with us right now, so we can have a conversation rather than just me sending information.
Thank you so much, Rashad. I think it's really critical for folks, if you have any questions or if you want to fill it out right now while we have Brother Rashad with us. That way, if there's any direct questions that you want to ask, then the opportunity exists and is there. So one thing I kind of wanted to dive a little bit deep into is not many folks realize that the census is required by law to fill out, and that people who refuse to fill out the census actually, I mean, I have never seen any cases of any individuals being fined or, being penalized for it, but I kind of wanted to go over exactly why is it a requirement, and then also just I mean, you did mention that it does allocate funding to our community needs, but how do we understand that? Where does that funding go? And why is it critical for us to realize that even on an individual level and within our families, within our specific regions, it's critical for us to fill it out.
I mean, it's absolute. It's required by law. It's in the Constitution. So the U.S. Constitution mandates that we do a census. So we're not going to go after people and force it that way. But enforce these laws that are in the books. But we will go from house to house to make sure that everybody is counted. Um, you know, um, it's about, as I mentioned, it's about federal funding as well as representation. So it's the basis of our democracy. So if we don't have an accurate count, then that means the representation of each state is incorrect. And we want to make sure that we all have accurate representation, and the complete count will make sure that we have accurate representation in each state. And federal funding, when I talk about the $675 billion, this is on an annual basis. So for the next 10 years. So we have one chance for the next 10 years. The next chance we will have is 2030 census. That's why it's so important and so critical. And when we're talking about federal funding, we're talking about our hospitals, our schools, our roads, our ability to respond to emergencies. We are in a pandemic right now. This is an emergency, and this is an example of why it's important to know how many people live in each state and each county and each city and each community, so that the federal government has the plans in place to be able to respond to such disasters and pandemics. That's just one example. But your children's school lunches is based on that. Universities plan according to census results, as we I didn't mention this, but there's the dorms are counted in a separate operation in their college dorms. So folks who live on campus count where they live in their college dorm. Even now that people aren't in their schools, they may have gone home. But everything from education to and for our community, it's important too. I mean, we have many community members who live in such, for example, in New York, there are some areas with a large Muslim community. So it's so important for our community to fill out their forms, so that these areas with large Muslim communities where we're concentrated get their fair share of federal funding.
Okay, thank you so much, Rashad. So there are a couple of questions here regards to ethnicity. So the first question is for one, how about ethnicity and race for Arabs? Do we fill it in as white? And then for individuals who already filled it out and they put white because they didn't realize there's other options, what can they do if they already submitted?
So if you already submitted, you cannot edit. So if you've done it, you cannot edit. You can fill it out again, but I mean, if it's done, it's okay. I will not necessarily tell you how to identify. That's something that the Census Bureau is not going to advise you on how to do. But you can go to your community organizations and community leaders in your own communities and see how they recommend you fill out that ethnicity and race question. But yes, so there's, in the race question, under white, there's you have an opportunity to fill out what your specific nationality is, or as other. So that is up to you and up to community leaders how they advise you to answer that question.
And is it a problem if folks do fill out the census form again, if they did put white and they feel more comfortable being able to touch other and write their specific ethnicity? Is there any harm in filling it out twice?
Uh, you can fill it out again, and you won't be counted twice. You can fill it out again.
You can fill it out again. Okay. And I know, so for a lot of folks, especially for me, I'm Somali. So when I fill in the box for being I'm Black, African American, but non-Hispanic background, I know I touch other as well and put Somali, because again, we want to make sure that our different ethnicities are being captured, because we're not invisible. So I know for a lot of community organizations, that's the advice that they've been giving to folks, is just to fill out what they're comfortable with and how they identify, and make sure that if a box is not there for you to fill out your ethnicity, you have that power to be able to write down your specific ethnicity. So I know some folks are filling it out right now as we speak. So I just kind of wanted to, if there's any other questions, please feel free to ask. Use the chat box. You can unmute yourself by touching #6. But I really want to kind of capture another angle of the census. So when it comes to our communities and the way redistricting works, census completely impacts our representation in Congress and our voice. So how do we better understand that? And if there is an undercount, like you mentioned, New York lost a congressional seat, and there's a lot of other states. I know California right now, there's an undercount. We stand to lose a congressional seat. So why is it so important for us to keep in mind that, yes, the census helps to determine, the data gathered from the census is going to help determine things until Census 2030 is conducted. But why is it critical for us to really think about this point about us having voice and visibility in Congress?
We want to make sure that we capture the entire nation. We want to make sure that each state is accurately represented. By counting everyone, we will make sure that each state will get its fair share of representation, for Congress members, their fair share of seats in the House of Representatives, so that those representatives can represent you and your communities accurately. We know that representatives are there to represent you, so they get elected so that they can represent you and fight for you and bring funding from the federal government to the local cities and communities. So that's why it's important that we capture everyone and get an accurate count, so that you can have an accurate representation. Like you said, California could use a seat. Texas gained 4 seats last time. New York lost 2 seats last time. So all of this is determined by how many people fill out their forms. And again, it's so important to understand that everybody counts. And that includes U.S. citizens, that includes green card holders, that includes undocumented folks, and that includes people who are international students and live in the United States. Even if they're gonna go home in 2, 3, 4 years, whenever they get their degree, they are counted in the census. So it's important that everybody who lives in the U.S. Fills out their census form.
Thank you so much, Rashad. I got 3 questions that were just messaged to me as well. The first one is with college students who are going back home, especially during this quarantine stay at home. Do they fill out the census at their parents' residence, or do they fill it out at their usual residence? Maybe we can answer that question before we can move on to the other 2.
Absolutely. They are counted where they live most of the time. So in this case, they are counted in their dorms, not where they should not be counted with where their parents live.
And then the second question that was presented in the chat was, where do folks find their 12-digit ID number?
That you received it in the mail. So I just checked my mail right now, like half an hour ago, and I saw the reminder postcard. So this was my third reminder, well, the second reminder. I got the first postcard or the first letter, and then 2 postcards after that. Total of 3 letters in the mail, and each one of them had that code number. If you don't have it, you can still count. You can still fill out the form online.
Okay, and then the follow-up question on that is it the registration number sent to me, but it is 11 digits?
I'm pretty
Yeah, I'm
sure
kind of
it's
confused on that question. Yeah, it should be a 12-digit ID number because that's what I received as well. So I think maybe this is a good time to talk about, a lot of folks, especially since this is the first time that is being provided for folks to fill out online, and that fear of scams, and how do you protect yourself from that, and how do you ensure what you're filling out is going to be protected.
Sure, I can talk about that. So now the form itself, you see it's online. It's my2020census.gov. So don't go to any other website if you get invited to fill it out on anywhere else. It's 2020census.gov. I'm sorry, my2020census.gov. So that's where you are supposed to fill it out. Now, we do have a cybersecurity program that meet the latest, highest standards for protecting your information. From the moment we collect your responses, our goal and legal obligation is to keep them safe. We encrypt this information, so the information is encrypted. We limit access to it, and we actively monitor our system to make sure your information stays secure. We are working with cybersecurity experts to keep the site protected, the census site to keep it protected, and we're leveraging a network of partners and communication tactics to assure the public that responding to the 2020 census is safe and easy and important and secure. So we do have security controls in place to prevent, isolate, and respond to any attempted data breaches. So again, we do have strong program to protect this information as we collect, process, and store it in our secure IT system. So there's no need to fear that. The questions are very simple, and your pizza delivery guy might have more sensitive information about you than the questions that we ask.
That's a really good point. So if there's any other questions, the last questions that was asked was, so the citizenship question was dropped, but there's still a little bit of hesitancy of folks filling out the census. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that as well. You talked about how your information is protected, but for folks who are undocumented, folks who are immigrants, refugees, and individuals who have not received their citizenship status yet, we're encouraging everybody to fill out. But can you address that point as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why we partnered with dozens, hundreds, and thousands of local and national organizations. We partnered with mosques, with churches, with community service providers, so that they can also relay that message. It's so important to count everyone. It's so important to count our undocumented families and our refugee families, because I mean, if we're talking about refugee families, the services that they are provided are so important, and the amount of funding that they receive will be determined by the census outcome. So it's so important. It's safe, it's secure. Once again, simple questions. I don't find them invasive. They are not invasive questions, but the results will impact you and I, will impact our refugee families, our immigrant families, our undocumented families for the next 10 years. So I don't think there's an excuse not to fill out your census forms. If you know that your children and my children and your families and my family will be impacted by the funding of the federal government based on this outcome of the census.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because the reality is when the entire family is counted from the eldest to the youngest, even if the baby is 1 day old, you know, capturing that information is so critical, because at least for San Diego and California region, one individual is equal to about almost $2,000 or $1,000 to $2,000 per person per year, funding that we could receive. And so, say for instance, in my family, if we're not counted, then that's money that's going to be not coming towards our specific needs in our specific region. So it's definitely critical to realize. But you know, I don't know if you know the average of how each individual across on a national level is equal, money wise, you know, monetary wise, to funding that might be coming to their region. I know every state is a little bit different. But realizing that this is real dollars that can come to our community needs, our schools, you know, education system, healthcare system, and moments like this with COVID-19 as well, rapid response, and you know, understanding that in moments of crisis as well. So I know there was another question, but similar to that question that you answered earlier. So maybe we can just recap that. For parents who have let me read the question. So for postgraduate students, do parents include them in their count, but put them as living on their own?
If they're not living, if they don't live in that home, they're not included there. So we count everyone where they live most of the time. Just because there's an emergency right now and everybody went home to or went home to their parents' homes, does not mean that you fill out that they're included in that household. People are counted where they live most of the time. So that means in their apartments or college dorms near their college.
All right, thank you so much. If there's any other questions, I can unmute folks, but this is a good time to ask before we wrap it up, inshallah. Oh, there's one more. So do those students fill in another form? So they should have received, for students, they should have received a form on their own in their mailbox, whether they're in the dorms or living on their own, correct?
Yes, and if you don't have it, you can still go on my2020census.gov and fill it out. You can, if you don't have access to that number, to the 12-digit number, then you can still fill. You can go to, if you do not have, you click on, if you do not have a census ID, click here. So you can still fill it out that way.
Perfect, inshallah. Any other questions? What about the people who are living overseas?
They live overseas, so you answered your question. It's they don't, if they don't live in the U.S., then they don't count.
Yeah. So the census is a complete count of the total population in the U.S. states and also the territories like Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and other regions. My husband and I have to fill separate forms. That's the question that was put here, or is it one form per household?
It's one form per household. So if it's the paper form, you include everyone on that form. Online, I just showed an example. Every person's name will be listed. So basically, you write down how many people live in that household, and then the next step is to provide the information on every person, their names and their ages and date of birth.
And take it like subhanAllah, it's a sunnah to have everybody come out for Eid, including the newborn baby, subhanAllah. So the census take it as every single person has to be counted, even the newborn baby, every single person in that household, whether they're relatives, whether they're not relatives, whoever's living with you at that time in that specific household on April 1st.
Absolutely, yes.
The other question that we have here, After I finished the questionnaire, there were some final questions shown in the bar above, but there was no way to get these to answer them. Brother, if you can elaborate on that a little bit more.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, after I finished the questionnaire, there were some final questions shown in the bar above, but there was no way to get these to answer them. So I guess there was no way to access those questions.
I'm not sure if I understand the question, because I did complete my my form, and you will get a, once you complete it and it's done, you will get a confirmation that it's completed. You'll receive it in your email. So if you did not get that, then that means you did not completely fill it out. You might want to do it again.
So, and then do you have to fill out all 10 questions?
Yes.
So I have received that, so it is good. Okay, perfect. And then there's another question about what should I write the origin?
However you identify yourself. So there are options, and then there's other, and fill in the blanks. So however you like to identify yourself. And if you're from two different backgrounds, you can choose more than one option.
All right. Let's see. Jazakumullah khairan. Alhamdulillah. I'm glad that this is helpful. Any other questions that we may have? All right. Thank you so much, Brother Rashad. If you can just close us off with just really honing in on how critical it is to have our communities be counted. Inshallah, we will be sharing this live recording with folks as well. Inshallah, just to make sure that we continue to make to have our families, our communities count. Because the way that I always looked at it was, if we're not seen, if we're invisible, then our power as a community is reduced, and the resources, the funding that we need, that needs to come into our communities, are reduced. So maybe just from your point, talk about, you know, again, why is it critical for us to just encourage our families, to encourage our neighbors to be able to fill this out?
This is the basis of our democracy. This is if you want to be visible, you want to be counted. This is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. I myself made sure to be counted the first time in the year 2000. I was a new immigrant to this country. I filled out my form, and then in 2010, I worked for the U.S. Census Bureau as a partnership specialist to make sure that I encourage my community and encourage residents in my city and my community to fill out their forms. And then 2020 came. It was seasonal. 2020 came, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go back to the census. They're hiring again. I'm gonna go back to the census and make sure that I encourage all of my community to be counted again, because it's so important. It determines our future. And this time it was even more important to me because now I have children, and I want to make sure that they are represented and they are counted. So it's so important that we count all of our communities, our families, our children, our undocumented families, our refugee families, our immigrant families, because our future is dependent on this census. So please fill out your form. It's Census Day. Do it today. Tell your family, tell your friends, share it on your social media outlets. Make sure everyone knows. We want to get an accurate count of everyone. We want to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. Happy Census Day.
Thank you so much, Brother Rashad. Jazakumullah khairan, everyone, for joining us. Again, Mass-Paced Muslim American Society Public Affairs and Civic Engagement Division of Mass will be following up with folks, and will be encouraging you. We are having a census challenge where families will, you know, take a picture. It can be your beautiful selves. It can be, you know, the form without any identifying information, or anything that you feel like, inshallah, with hashtag census selfie or census challenge and tag us on our social media accounts through MassPace or through Mass. Inshallah, look to our website, masspace.org, as well as Muslim American Society.org to learn more, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, everyone, for joining us. In 20 minutes, we are going to be starting our Mass Daily Focus, 6 p.m. every evening, 6 p.m. Pacific time every evening, where we have spiritual reminders and grounding us to really just connect in this moment of self-quarantine and staying at home measures, so that we're enriching our soul, we're rising to action, but also rising to worship as well. So Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a beautiful and wonderful day. Keep everybody in your prayers, and we'll see you again to our next programming. Assalamu alaikum.